This is the latest in a series of roundtables that CMHA has been running to help business leaders through these challenging times. For those who don't know me, Nigel Jones, co-founder, former chair and currently chair of the advisory group of City Mental Health Alliance and involved in various other mental health and wellbeing related initiatives. We won't have time to introduce everybody, but the speakers I'll introduce in a moment. I wanted to just mention one person whose name and face will be new to many of us, Charlie McQuaker, who is investment director at Walter Scott and Partners, who is joining as a guest. Charlie and I met virtually last week, discussed mental health in the context of business, and he was keen to learn a bit more about what City Mental Health is all about. So Charlie, a particular welcome to you this morning up in Edinburgh. So one of the reasons for these sessions is to build on the three key messages I've learned in the 10-year journey I've had through City Mental Health, and they are very simple. One, for any wellbeing initiative to succeed, it must be led from the very top. Secondly, stories are enormously powerful. And thirdly, collaboration beats competition every time. And so that's why we've brought together all of you as business leaders, with 4 of you kindly agreeing to say a few introductory remarks along those themes. My role today is, first of all, to try and help us all put aside other stresses and strains and focus all of our attention on each other for the next hour or so. Secondly, to ensure that we finish on time. 1 or 2 of our panelists have to leave slightly early, and I will make sure we do finish by no later than 10 at the very latest. And most importantly, to ensure that by then, each of us has learned at least 3 new things that we're going to do differently in order to help to ensure that mental health is kept at the heart of the rebuild through these difficult economic times. So those are my roles, and I'll introduce the speakers in a moment. But first of all, can I ask you please all just to take a moment to settle down and focus on what we're going to be covering for the next few days. And if you're comfortable, it's only going to take a minute, just close your eyes, sit comfortably, sitting up straight, hands on your thighs, and just do a couple of gentle shoulder rolls. Just roll your shoulders gently back, small circles, then getting slightly bigger, gently, nothing too dramatic, and then stop, and then shoulder rolls back the other way. Feel that blood rushing into the bottom of your neck, hopefully feeling positive, energizing, focusing, keeping your eyes closed. And drop your shoulders gently down, and then just focus on your breathing. Breathe in through your nose, count to 4, 2, 3, 4, pause, and then gently out through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Once again, just gently breathing in through your nose. 2, 3, 4. Hold it. And then gently out. And then one more round in your own time. Now you can open your eyes again, but what I would like everybody to do is, if they could mute their camera for the time being, mute their microphone, but not use that as an excuse to start looking at everything else that may be on your screen. Please get everybody really focus on what other people during this call are saying, so that when I ask any of you at the end, which I reserve the right to do, what are the 3 things you have learned from today, you're able to respond without hesitation. So with that, the 4 people who have kindly agreed to prepare themselves a little bit for this are Anne-Marie Verstraeten from BNP, Matt Thorogood from PwC, Charlie Jacobs from Linklaters, and Chris Saul Associates, former senior partner of Slaughter & May, and one of a number of senior leaders without whom in the very early days of CMHA we wouldn't be here today. And I'm going to start by asking each of them a couple of questions to set the scene. So Matt, as you sit in front of your screen here today, how would you rate your well-being, your personal well-being, and why? You'll need to come off mute.
This week's been quite a difficult week for me, actually. Mainly because my daughter started university on Monday, and despite thinking that I was going to be okay, it came as a bit of a surprise to me that it was I'd describe it as being traumatic, and so it's day 3 today, and I feel a bit better. The sun was shining this morning. It's a little bit cloudy now, but as we come into autumn, I think it's not a good time of year for me. I don't like the autumn generally. The nights are getting. I can sense the clock's about to change at the end of the month, and as we go into COVID and lockdown, I think it feels as though everything's coming together in a negative way. So my well-being, I'd say, is I think I'm quite a resilient individual, but this week is being particularly tough. And despite, as I say, trying to prepare for the fact that my daughter's leaving, she went away for 3 weeks before going to university, and I was absolutely fine. But there's something around coming back to her room, being emptied of all her possessions, etc., and the kind of semi-permanence of the move with all her personal possessions going out has been. I'd describe it as quite traumatic. So I think for those of you who've been through it, I'm sure you'll understand how that feels. And talking to a couple of fellow partners has been really helpful. And a partner called me last night at 10 o'clock just to check that I was okay, which meant a huge amount to me, just that one phone call. And he just said, look, I'm 2 weeks into this and I feel a lot better. You'll feel a lot better in 2 weeks. So that's kind of where I am. Thank you, Matt. And you've jumped ahead as well to some ways in which people can help each other, but that's really helpful to have that. And I think I know for sure that you're not alone on this call in having difficulties adjusting to what's going on with university-age children. So thank you for sharing that. Charlie.
So Nigel, I draw a distinction between the physical side and the mental side. I'd say on the physical side, one of the upsides of this COVID period has been actually no travel for someone like me with 30 offices around the world. Every other week I was normally flying. I probably didn't realize how tired I was and how jet lagged I was. And actually not having to do that travel, not out for the late night dinners. Actually, I feel physically fitter than I've been for years. I lost quite a lot of weight. Doing this 100-day challenge with lots of colleagues in the office, don't have to commute every day. So actually that's a plus. I'd say the flip side is, I'm a big believer people need people and people need human interaction. And I'm someone who's very used to my role, just walking down corridors, chatting to people. I really miss that. And I know lots of people on the call will miss it as well. And I just feel a little bit lonely, a little bit isolated in my role, trying to run a global firm from a laptop. We're beginning to go back into the office, then got government guidance, please don't be in the office. And it's just quite a difficult time to feel the pulse and rhythm of an organization when you're not mixing with people. And we've got a partners meeting this week and we're doing it all virtually. And again, that's something which just in a way is more stressful. It's much nicer having people in the room and being able to read them than doing it on its own. So I think a slight difference between the physical and the mental. And I sense people are a bit jaded, not having had proper holidays, not able to take holidays, going into the winter. And I'd probably put myself in a similar situation to that as well.
Thank you, Charlie. One thing I should have said and didn't, is you'll see that the recording button at the top left-hand corner is flashing. The contributors have agreed to that, and it won't be going out publicly, but I think it's now fairly common. But if anybody has any difficulties with that, could they let us know? The second question I was going to come on to and put this to Anne-Marie and then Chris is, well, it's a sort of two questions. For city businesses, what in your view is A, the biggest single threat, and B, the single biggest opportunity from the economic effect the COVID crisis will have over the next 6 to 12 months? So the one threat and one opportunity from the economic effect of COVID over the next 6 to 12 months. Anne-Marie, do you want to have a go first?
Good morning all. Yes, thank you, Nigel. So I do want to borrow a little bit from Matt, though, who said everything is coming together in a negative way, is his sentiment. I think this is going to be the backdrop against which I fear the economic impact is really going to start to hit. So I fear most really bankruptcies, which would have a knock-on effect on employment or unemployment. And I think this will really hit what is already a sort of troubled state of mind, uncertainty. On the plus side, I do think that we are all determined as organizations to integrate some very good practices that have emerged in remote working. And that, I think, will help us to reconfigure our business models to become more sustainable. This is something that I believe we need to do, and I think COVID has really accelerated, and the economic impact will force us to accelerate that even more.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Chris, on that question about opportunity and threat.
Nigel, thank you for having me. In terms of threat, I think the biggest threat, and this is picking up a bit on Charlie's theme actually, but is loss of cultural fabric, purpose, innovative vigor as a result of teams being dispersed and not together. I think that many city businesses are people businesses, and they thrive on being together and teaching young people, of course, so the teaching piece as well. So I think this dispersion, whilst in some sense is efficient, you lose a lot of sort of cultural glue. So I think that's really quite a significant threat. And the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is. And the opportunity, of course, is the flip side of that can also be a catalyst for change that you would not otherwise envisage. So it will drive, of course, thinking about office footprint. It will drive other ways to be together, town halls and maybe occasional meetings in off-site venues, that sort of thing. And of course, it will drive thoughtful technological solutions. You know, I think quite a lot of us, particularly frankly in my generation, are a bit lazy when it comes to IT. And I think forcing yourself to be just more literate is kind of a good thing, actually.
Well, just one tip on that, which is not novel, but worked extremely effectively. I was in a board meeting yesterday, and as I switched my computer on 10 minutes ahead, it wouldn't come on.
Yeah.
So then I thought, oh, I'll use my phone. So I used my phone, and then everybody said, oh, go on to Google to fix your computer. And I said, well, that's a bit counterintuitive. And they said, no, use your phone. So then for some reason, we were all thrown out of the call, at which point I crawled under my desk, switched the computer off at the mains, switched it back on again, and hey presto. And one of the other members of that board is coming up for the transition I went through 2 and a bit years ago of moving from her current full-time role in a professional services firm to whatever comes next. And she said one of the biggest concerns she had was, how am I going to cope without an IT support line? And I said, well, there you are. That's all they ever tell you to do anyway. So I just did it. There we are. So there are some technicals. I have learned, Christopher, you see, a technical solution. Thank you all for sharing those thoughts. And for those who've joined a bit later, we will give everybody a chance to contribute in a moment. But the main thrust now I'd like to get into is the practical. So one of the things that City Mental Health Alliance was created to do and has done, in my view, extremely effectively over the last 10 years, is not only talk about the theory, not only share personal stories, which a number of you already have, and also identify practical steps that people think will work in terms of workplace well-being and creating mentally healthy workplaces. And so what I'm going to ask each of the speakers now to do, and I'm giving them a little bit more time to do this, although I do want to create time for discussion. So just in a couple of minutes is, what actions are you planning to take to keep yourself and your people well through this prolonged period of economic uncertainty. And on this occasion, perhaps I'll start with Anne-Marie, if I may.
Thanks, Nigel. So I think what I have learned is really key as we move forward as a leader to listen, and that you do by reaching deep and wide, but also regularly through short interactions. Many people have told me that the frequency of a brief contact does keep them connected, and does indeed, to take a point of Charlie on the culture, just give that little bit of a boost in terms of the continued sense of belonging. But most of all, in a way, is not so much speaking, it's really listening. People now find it more difficult, I think, to be heard, and hearing how they feel, their ideas, I think is really key. So personally, I will try to do more of that, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. Another realization I have is that while we have done a lot in terms of offering concrete initiatives like many firms do, we do communicate, I think, quite well about all the support initiatives we have taken, the alliances we promote. But in a way, people have been so busy that I think they have not necessarily registered those. So we need to make the support that we offer more visible. And we need to do even better with our communication around that. So these are, for me, actually two concrete action points within our organization.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. And it's very, very interesting to observe the number of occasions and the variety of meetings in which listen more is the advice that's being given. And it reminds me, in the lead up to a previous Linklaters partners meeting many years ago, when I was asked to run a session on well-being, which I think was the first time that had happened, at least at Linklaters. And I asked a range of partners to talk to other people in their networks. What could senior people do more in order to move the needle? And then I also asked our in-house occupational health nurse. And whilst many of the partners ummed and ahed and weren't entirely sure, without hesitation, she said, listen more. And it was something that she felt from her experience within Linklaters, and I'm sure it's not, I know it's not unique, was that at that time, senior people were not perceived to be very good at listening. And if you don't listen actively, you can't hear what's being said. So thank you, Anne-Marie. So listening and more visible, improved communications in terms of what support you are already offering. Chris, I'm going to come to you next because I know you have to drop off the call slightly earlier than others, and then Charlie, and then Matt. So just to give you a sense of order. So Chris, what would you add to that list?
Nigel, thank you so much. So CSA is quite a compact organisation, and therefore I haven't got many people, if you like, to look after. So if I may, I'll sort of borrow a couple of ideas from others, and two thoughts really. And the first is around, that has been a point that's obviously been highlighted, which is one of isolation and lack of camaraderie. I was very struck by what Gary Mabbott did with Tottenham Hotspur. Some of you will know this, but Gary Mabbott started the process of ringing one fan every day to see how they were, which I thought was rather great. And I heard his call with his I think it was 1,000th fan that he rang, and it was very touching, actually. And it occurred to me that it's something that business leaders could maybe do a little more of. So, you know, if you could perhaps get from HR, to the extent you can, a list of those who live on their own and who may be vulnerable, and have a process of making one phone call to people who might otherwise be lonely every day, and say, well, how are you? I think that could be very powerful. So the Gary Mabbott thing, I think, is something to ponder. And the second point is one about boundaries. You know, quite a lot of people tell me that it's really hard because they spend their whole day in front of the screen. They're never off duty. Clients know exactly where they are and don't mind ringing day and night. And that's hard, and that it's not working from home, it's sleeping at the office. And one PLC that I know has a couple of good ideas. So they have something called a recharge day, so that for one Friday every month, in rotation, if you like, people are required not to be on email or on telephone, so that they've got an assured long weekend, which I think is a nice idea. And their second directive is that people should try and arrange calls so that they are not between 12 and 2, so that they can genuinely have some sense of pause in the middle of the day. So the big point, I think, is one around boundaries and the extent to which in a WFH environment, leaders can reinforce the notion that you're not required always to be on, and that the leadership respect the fact that you've got to have some time for yourself.
Thank you, Chris. Do you just want to say a little bit about what your association does? Because the reason I thought it would be helpful to get your perspective was not necessarily for your own organization, but you do a lot of board reviews with major organizations and obviously pick things up. So just very briefly, a little bit about how you've picked up what's going on at board level in other organizations.
Sure. So what I do in my new life, I'm what I describe as a recovering lawyer. So I'm no longer a solicitor, which was a bit of a wrench, to be honest. So in my new life, I have an advisory consultancy that works mainly with PLC directors and PLC boardrooms, and a bit with professional service firms as well. But I really help boards and directors think about and be a sounding board for governance challenges and managerial challenges in their various businesses. And as part of that, I do some board effectiveness reviewing, which I find completely fascinating, because you get the chance, which is such a treat, to get under the skin of different businesses, and also to see boardroom dynamics, which, as we all know, are never less than complicated and always engaging. So that, and it's a privilege for me to see different organizations, and over the last 6 months, the way those organizations have sought to manage what have been incredibly traumatic times, both in terms of making the business work well and also looking after people.
Thank you. And I think I did hear that Gary Mabbott interview on the radio when he called that 1,000th person. I think that just demonstrates, picking up on what Matt said at the very beginning, frequent, short, unexpected calls, I think, can be hugely powerful. And again, as business has done from sport in relation to mental health more generally, that there are other sectors of the community from whom we can learn. Although, and I'll come to Charlie next, but one also memory I have from my early days at Linklaters was the then senior partner, wandering around the floor, and the rumor would go around thinking, oh God, what's he coming here for? If it's not done regularly, then people can get quite scared about what's going to happen. So I'm sure Charlie would not create that fear, but Charlie, what would your practical steps be? What are you going to do, and what are you going to help your people do to keep well through this uncertain economic period?
So Nigel, picking up a few other things, some things we're doing or we're in the process of implementing. So the one thing we did, like a lot of people, is we implemented the agile working policy straight away to say, actually, we're never going to get back to where we were. You can work remotely. We expect people to spend, when they can, 50 to 80% of the time in the office. The rest of the time you work on an agile basis, and you don't need to ask for permission. So we thought, let's show our people now that we've learned from this, and obviously guidance now means people are at home, but implement now on that. The next thing we recognize, people being at home together does give rise to some abuse situations, and we implemented a domestic abuse policy, which meant any of our sort of 5,500 people around the world, if they're in a situation they're uncomfortable, there's a number they call, there's some money, there's some support and everything, we just get them out of there. And I think people liked that and saw us doing something tangible. The next tangible thing we did is we did reopen the office from early September. And then obviously guidance meant in London, we needed to tell people that they should work from home if they could. But we did say to people, listen, the office is COVID safe. And if you feel you need to come in for your wellness, and we made wellness in that term, you still can. And we were very cognizant that there were quite a few of our people who did feel they needed to come in. And I'm sure with winter coming on as well, and the short days and everything else, there will be people who will think the thought of spending 6 months at home in the same room is really depressing. And the one thing we found, you know, if I talk to our people in Asia, they said the first lockdown, people think it's a bit of novelty. Sending people home for the second time is tough. And wait till you do it for the third time. All of these concerns kind of raise. So I think getting that balance between respecting government guidance, but recognizing some of your people do need somewhere to go. And the one thing I do, and I've said to people, I'll be honest with you, for my wellness, I feel I need to come in a bit. And I do come in a bit, sort of showing people, you know, you don't have to be on suicide watch. There are reasons you may feel you need to come in. And one of the things I try and do is I go sit down in our canteen, and I just take my laptop and stuff, and I try and be visible so people can see I'm there. And if they want to come for a chat in a socially distanced way, they can. So it's harder to walk the corridors, but people do tend to come and get a nice coffee, one of the attractions coming in. And if they see the senior partner kind of there now and again, and they know you're kind of around, they begin to know I sit there for a while around breakfast time, they can come and chat. And I clock there in and so on, and a bit of rapport. So just a few practical things from my side, Nigel.
Thank you, Charlie. And I think, you know, practical, it seemed to me clear that the whole shift back to working in an office, if it was going to be effective, like everything else on wellbeing, had to be led from the very top. And it concerned me the number of senior people in the city who I was talking to in recent months who were actually quite happy in their country house down in Hampshire or whatever, and surprised at how well home working was doing, and finding reasons for not coming into board meetings when I was encouraging them to, until I raised the question, well, if you don't go back into the office, how do you think anybody else is going to feel comfortable doing that, including those who really need to? Then there is a challenge to that also, which is, well, if by the senior partner going back in, that puts pressure on people who really don't want to for whatever reason, and I've certainly picked this up in people who are disproportionately affected from a health perspective by COVID, who therefore are more concerned, which includes people from different ethnic backgrounds. Are they, if the senior people go in and they don't, and all of the white middle class straight men do, are they therefore going to be favoured? So I think it's one of many challenges, but I do think this leading by example, sitting in the canteen, demonstrating your commitment and providing that opportunity for the informal conversation, I think are all excellent ideas. And your point about domestic abuse, just picking up on the Gary Abbott story, one expert I've been speaking to has told me that there is no data which shows that the people who have suffered most are those who are actually in some form of relationship, living with someone and suffering from domestic abuse, more than those who are living alone. Now, I don't have chapter and verse on that. So again, one has to be a little bit careful how one chooses the 1,000 people one's going to call, and not making judgments without knowing exactly who is most at risk. Matt, over to you. You're on mute again, sorry.
Thanks, Nigel. Yeah, one of the things that we've done on a regular basis is host webcasts and live streams with our senior leaders and a psychiatrist. And so the last one was last week, where our senior partner hosted a firm-wide webcast to all partners and staff, where he was interviewing one of our psychiatrists that we use. And you've got something like a 90% take up on those webcasts and livecasts, 90% of our people, so 25,000 people, 90% people dialing into that. And they're very, I mean, for me, they're very practical sessions. where you're listening to a psychiatrist talk about some of the things that have already been talked about. So, for example, talking about this situation where the day can be relentless, and the need to take breaks, the need to have recovery. And so you're hearing directly from a psychiatrist his advice on what people should do. So whether that's how you take breaks, mindfulness, some apps out there which are great on mindfulness, the need to look out for one another, being with colleagues, just spending time with colleagues, and talking about, again, very practical things around why that's a good thing for some people. So, for example, the fact that you spend time in the office with people, and again, I very much agree with Charlie in terms of this isn't just a business need. I think for a lot of people, there's a strong personal need to be with people, being with colleagues. It releases endorphins that make you feel better. And we talked about these things across the firm, and we've done regular webcasts, as I say, with psychiatrists and psychologists, sometimes firm-wide, sometimes in smaller groups. We've done it as a partner group, again, and looking at some of the leadership issues that they should be thinking about for their people. So we're giving people a lot of guidance and help around how to maintain their resilience and how to think about their mental health and the mental health of others. All of those sessions have been very interactive. So we've had Q&A throughout for half of the sessions, and those will continue. And I think as we go through the kind of the COVID journey, the nature of those conversations and those Q&As have changed. I think we're now into a very different period now than we were when we first went into lockdown. So, for example, I think the announcement or if it was an announcement, the fact that we were told, this is going to be around for at least another 6 months, if not longer, I think for a lot of people, some grey clouds came down over them. That was a bit of a shock. And I think for a lot of people, that's quite hard. So again, talking about the things how to deal with that sort of thing and how to cope with those kinds of issues, where you've got senior leaders talking to psychiatrists, I think is really powerful. So that's one of the things. And again, I wanted to come back to the office point, because I very much agree with Charlie in terms of it's really important for us that we keep our offices open. We've got a lot of younger people that, for partners, working from home is not too bad because you've got a lot of space. But for a lot of our people, they don't have that space. They are in a small flat, working off an ironing board, don't even have a table. So the ability to come into the office and work and have a routine of going into the office is really, really important. And I think that's something that we will, in terms of the numbers of people coming in, post the Boris announcement around the need to work from home if you can, the numbers haven't dropped that much. And I think that's because we've been very clear with our teams and our people that if they need to come into the office, they can. For me, I'm coming in 3 days a week, and that for my own mental health is really important. What I try and do is to make sure that for my own team, and I have a team of about 50 people, when I come in, I let everyone else know that I'm coming in. So we keep a team diary. So, if I see that there's only 2 people coming in one day, I may not come in. But the fact that we can all see what everyone else is doing, and what happens is you tend to find that a lot of people come in for some reason on a Thursday. So Thursdays are a really good day for me because it feels as though the whole team's working together. And just having that one day where you get a bit of a lift is really important. And I think, and it creates an atmosphere, as I say, it releases those endorphins that just make you feel better. I go home, it's close to the weekend, Friday's working from home, it makes a huge difference. And as we go into these dark dark nights. I think, as Charlie said, I think you're going to see more people wanting to have time in the office.
Thank you, Matt. And if people would like to ask a question or make a contribution, we've got a bit of time now. Chris has to leave at 1:30. So if anybody has a question for anything Saul said, then I'll give you precedence. So I'll just make a couple of comments and then open it up. So if you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand and come off the camera. My screen isn't big enough to see everybody, so this may be a bit of a challenge. So I apologize if I don't spot you straight away. One random thought that I blurted out the other day when someone was talking about dark nights. I said, with every day that passes, spring comes one day nearer. And I've been amazed at how many people find that a positive way of looking at things. It's, I'm sure, not original, and probably somebody else has said it many times, but if you like autumn, well, it's almost here. If you like winter, that's coming. If you like spring and summer, they're on their way too. So maybe that helps. And something else with World Mental Health Day coming up later, which I've shared with one or two people, is the just don't mantra. On Saturday, just don't access any social media. Just don't do things, just be. Just don't compare yourself with somebody else. Obviously, there is a very well-known brand with which that's associated in a very different way, for which I have a lot of respect. And no doubt Charlie may even wear their shoes when he goes running to lose all the weight he's lost, but I don't know. But just a thought to share. Would anybody like to, there's lots of things on chat here. John Godfrey, would you like to raise a question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. And sorry, I missed the beginning of this. I was on another call, but great points. And the one I would emphasize, I think, is that that there are a number of people in different functions in the broader city ecosystem who actually can't effectively work from home. So, we find that, for example, in some aspects of call center operations, that was very difficult to sort people out with the right kit to work from home in the first lockdown. And things like post room functions, where you still have a lot of customers who actually write physically to you. You've got to have somebody there to process these things. So it's important to look after those people. And what we've found effective so far has been to really emphasize the resources that are available to staff in the shape of employee helpline, unmined and digital tools and so on. But we also do find that this point is absolutely right, that you've got to lead from the top, and we're trying to do that. So I would just agree with a lot of the points that have been made, and really emphasize that this is a good time to be looking at new tools and techniques to try and help particularly the more junior people who, as you say, as many people have said, can't luxuriate at home while working online.
Thank you, John. Sorry, I should have said Legal and General is where John is from, for those who don't know you. And could I just remind you, before I come to Nick Derbyshire, who I think has a point, that I did set as the objective for all of us today that we all learn 3 new things that we're going to do differently or add to our list as we help our people and others keep themselves well over the continuing financial uncertainty. So people could please be reflecting on what's on their list. Nick, do you want to come off mute and introduce yourself?
Nigel.
Yeah. Oliver Wyman.
Thanks to all the speakers. It's been a great session. I just wanted to build on something Chris said, the Gary Mabbott example, and maybe this is one of my commitments. I think that the speaking to somebody one a day idea is great. Certainly my experience, or myself and my fellow partners in the UK, you tend to focus on the people that you can see are struggling within your teams. And I think actually one of the things that I'm going to take away is it's actually important to be talking to the people that seem fine as well. It's actually quite difficult to pick up on, how people are actually doing. And I've certainly found myself in the check-ins that I've been having, doing those with a focus on the people I think are struggling. But I think I'm certainly going to take away an action that each day I'm going to talk to the people that on the surface seem okay, as opposed to focusing on just the people that are, you know, much more in much more difficult situations. That's my Gary Mabbott point, I think, for the day.
Thank you, Nick. And I'll come, Susan, to you in a second. But before I do, Chris, if you need to drop off, please do. And our thanks for joining for the time you can. Anything you wanted to say just before you have to drop off, before I come to Susan?
So, first of all, thank you so much. It's been fascinating. Thanks for having me. One just last thought. I go through, you know, when things are a bit more difficult, I find that one good thing to do is, before I go to bed, just jot down the good things that have happened today. It's very sustaining, actually, and it helps you think through the day as good things happen. And it just puts you in a slightly sunnier mood as you contemplate a night of Zeds. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for that positive, practical, upbeat storytelling. Thank you very much, Chris. Susan, you wanted to contribute.
Hi, thank you. So Susan Brack from Hogan Lovells. This has been really great. And just to follow on, I've recently started actually doing just what was suggested. So thinking through and writing down one really great thing at the end of the day. And it's remarkable. It does put you in a really good mood. So I had one practical suggestion and then one question for everybody. So the practical suggestion, the thing I'm finding really, really hard is the... I'm feeling zoomed out. The fact that, you know, I sit down in front of this at the beginning of every day, either here or I am still going into the office. And I'm, you know, sometimes it's 14 hours a day. So one of the practical suggestion I'm starting to try to institute is to redefine meeting times. So rather than half an hour, 25 minutes, and rather than an hour, 50 minutes. And I think if we could get that through our organisations, just that ability to stand up, go and get a coffee, and not just go straight from one thing to another, because normally we get that naturally by walking around in office from room to room. So that was just one practical thing that I'm trying. And then I had a question really for everybody. One of the things I'm finding hard is to be able to tell when, you know, people aren't doing so well when you're not face to face with people. And I just wondered if people on this call have any tips for identifying or trying to identify where you've got colleagues who, you know, who you think are fine but are not. So I'm going to take away the idea of bringing people who seem fine and asking the question and seeing what happens. But has anyone got any ideas of how to spot people who are struggling when you're not face to face with them? I'm finding that harder.
Thank you, Susan. Can I do Charlie, Anne-Marie, and then Charlie, Matt, and Anne-Marie to try and sort of keep Charlie, what would your...
Yeah. So the one thing I encourage people to do is to look out for those people in their teams, almost in kind of pods, because you're right to say, if you're a kind of senior manager with lots of people reporting into you, you're not going to spot it all. So I think we all have a duty to look left and right. And if you sense a friend of yours, someone you're working with, is sort of under the cosh, whatever, you know, think about how you communicate that so we can help. And, you know, we have had situations where people work terribly hard virtually, and then, you know, they just collapse, right? No one's around. So I think you need more than one person, and you have to break official reporting lines and do more around the edges. And I think that's bottom up and top down. And then the other thing is just looking at people. I mean, I think sometimes you do just look at someone and think, God, they look awful. And then you find, you know, a month later, actually, they really haven't been good. And you think, I should have gone with my instinct that if someone doesn't look good, they're probably not good. And there's a way of you putting a call in, the Gary Mabbott, kind of, how are you? So 2 practical tips from me.
Thank you, Charlie. And Matt, I'll come to you in a second, and then Anne-Marie. But one thing that I've picked up from others is sort of almost informal buddying, but someone who's just joined your organization is less likely to be comfortable talking to the senior partner than someone who's been there 6 months. So sort of peer-to-peer support, I think, recognizing that some people feel uncomfortable if they're told they're supposed to be looking after the mental health of a colleague because they don't know how to do that. But just being a friend to them, I think, is perhaps a different way of putting it. Matt, what would your suggestions to Susan be?
It's a bit like, I mean, my view is it's a bit like a triage system at an accident. It's probably the quiet ones that need some help rather than the ones that are possibly shouting for help. And I think certainly in my experience, you do notice when somebody's not in a hangout, in a team hangout. I ask all my directors on my team to make sure that they're connecting with everyone and that everyone is there. But I think you can see signs of, and I know the other way around. Somebody said to me, sent me a note on Monday, just saying it's okay to be upset. This is when I was dropping my daughter off at uni. One of my directors said it's okay to be upset. Now, I'd not said anything. And that note came out of the blue, and I was thinking, well, I must have shown some sort of sign that I was stressed or unhappy. And it may have been just talking about it. It may have been, I said I'll be fine. You know, and she obviously picked up the fact that I was stressed about it. And the note meant so much to me, and made all the difference, because they have got, it makes you feel warm that you've got a member of your team that actually cares. And I think doing that in reverse, just trying to pick up the signs, it's not always obvious, and it's not always the obvious ones, the people that are saying they need help, that necessarily need the help. It's the subliminal messages that people put out, or the lack of communication, and you just have to be really observant around what people are doing and not necessarily what they're saying. You know, the best advice I had was, you know, don't listen to what people say, watch what they do.
And I think that's really building on what Anne-Marie was saying. It's listening and observing, listening with your eyes as well as your ears, I guess. Anne-Marie, what would your tips to Susan be?
Well, I would really agree with everything that has been said. I think, in addition, I very much believe in the point Charlie made. You know, you break across the existing hierarchies. So when I am in the office, which I also try to calibrate with working from home, I do actually go around the floors. And I think for me, it's been very useful, and I hope for our employees, to just chat a little bit with who is around. I get to meet people like that who I didn't know at all levels. And it seems that that is a sort of an additional dimension that people appreciate, and we didn't perhaps normally have in the way we operate. The other one I very much would like to underline, I think it has been mentioned, is to let one's intuition play. Because it is true, being observant on some patterns, I can sometimes really think, I haven't seen an email from so-and-so for a while. That's very unusual. Is something not quite right? So it can be an email, it can be a conversation. This sort of intuitive observations, I think, are now more than ever powerful.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. I'm going to use my chairman's prerogative to demonstrate that I've been listening, and we're going to finish this 20 minutes early, which is not quite the 50 minutes, Susan, you suggested, but we are all suffering from Zoom fatigue, and doing one of these for an hour and a quarter first thing on a Wednesday morning, I don't think is necessarily the best way of challenging Zoom fatigue. And I set you all your homework at the beginning, which was to note down what 3 things you have learned. So I'm not going to summarize, because it's completely irrelevant what I think the key messages from today are, beyond the fact that I think it has reinforced the importance of what we're all trying to do together as a group, as an alliance, through City Mental Health Alliance, in leading from the top with the examples you've given. And I'm sure we've all picked up things that we can do in addition to what we're already doing, and share with others. We've demonstrated the power of stories, starting from the get-go with Matt being very open and honest and authentic in sharing his, and the rest of the time we spent on practical steps we're taking. So there's one thing I'm pretty sure Poppy would like me to say, and I hope I've got this right, but one of the things that is clear is that the more information we have about what our people feel, the better we're all able, both individually and through the City Mental Health Alliance, to react. And I think there is a plan for Poppy and the team to get in touch with all members to ask if you would be comfortable sharing certain information with us from whatever surveys you're doing. Obviously, as everything that CMHA has done from day one, that would be confidential and not attributed, but there's a very rich pool of data out there, and we are one of very few, possibly the only organisation, which I think is, in my view, rightly trusted to collate some of that and share it back with you. So with that, and unless Poppy tells me there's something else I was supposed to be doing, are we okay, Poppy? I'm going to thank all of our speakers, including Chris, who was on before, particularly Matt, Anne-Marie and Charlie for sharing their insights, and all of you for giving up almost an hour of your time, and I hope learning from it. So with that, thank you very much indeed, and have a great day.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.